Rich. Thank you. It is 5:30 now. There are several new developments this morning following yesterday's terrorist attack on the U.S. Let's go ahead and take a look at the scene in New York. These are live pictures. Firefighters and rescue crews worked through the night in the rubble of the World Trade Center towers. Now, less than 24 hours ago, 2 hijacked planes crashed into the buildings. Another plane hit the Pentagon, and it is feared thousands are dead. Some people may still be alive as rescue crews comb through the rubble there as you're looking at live pictures in Manhattan this morning.
And among the dead, perhaps hundreds of firefighters and other rescue team members. This morning's Herald is reporting that 5 Arab men have been identified as suspects and that a car parked in a garage at Logan Airport has been seized. Flight training manuals were also found in this car. We have live team coverage this morning, starting with WBZ national correspondent Jennifer Jones. She's live in Washington, D.C.
Well, usually this time of morning, commuters are beginning to clog the roadways as they make their way into work. But today, there is an eerie calm about the streets of the nation's capital. You can still see smoke coming from the Pentagon and that gaping hole, just one part of the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history. This is the scene as crews continue to search for survivors and victims. A thick coating of dust covers the wasteland of twisted steel and rubble, the remains of what was once a shining symbol of America. Just yesterday, the screams of panic and faces of horror were like scenes from a movie. Real-life terror as 2 hijacked airliners carrying scores of passengers slammed into the Twin Towers of New York's World Trade Center.
Chaos. It's just chaos out here, it really is. So the Twin Towers fall. It's amazing. It's crazy.
Meanwhile, in Washington, the Pentagon also came under attack when a 3rd hijacked plane crashed into the sprawling military complex, killing as many as 800 people. And yet, a 4th hijacked passenger plane was reduced to rubble after it crashed south of Pittsburgh, a final blow that may have spared the presidential retreat of Camp David, the alleged target. In the aftermath, President Bush made it clear that justice will prevail for those who are responsible.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
Back in New York, emergency crews are working at their grim task. While the full extent of the damage and loss of life remains unknown, the heart of America has been changed forever. Now, rescue workers have set up a makeshift morgue outside of the Pentagon as they pull bodies from the debris. Meanwhile, sources say the FBI is searching sites in Central and South Florida as they work and learn of information that placed supporters of Osama bin Laden aboard the crashed jets. That's the latest live from Washington. I'm Jennifer Jones. Now back to you.
All right, Jennifer, thank you very much.
Now, Logan Airport, like all airports, are closed this morning, as you can imagine.
First time in our history that all of the airspace was shut down yesterday. Meanwhile, at this hour, hundreds of federal investigators are at Logan trying to determine how 2 jets from Boston could have been hijacked within minutes of each other. WBZ's Dan Ray is following the story live from the airport with the very latest information this morning. Dan, good morning.
Good morning, Scott. Good morning, Kerry. 2 jets from Boston, 2 jets that left from different terminals. So it's interesting that you have 2 airlines, 2 separate terminals, 2 jets involved in this horrible, horrible disaster tragedy that struck the Twin Towers in New York yesterday. Now, both newspapers here in Boston, the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald, are reporting some leads this morning which might help investigators begin to at least track how all of this unfolded. And what they're basically saying here in the newspapers this morning is that the investigators have learned that there has been some people spotted at Logan Airport. The Herald is reporting that investigators seized a car in the parking garage here at Logan Airport, and then inside the car were reportedly some Arabic language flight training manuals. The source says that 5 Arab men have been identified as suspects, including one who is a trained pilot. At least 2 of the suspects reportedly flew into Logan on Tuesday from Portland, Maine, where authorities believe they had traveled after crossing the Canadian border recently, the source says. Bags from one of the men did not make the connection, and the Boston Globe reports the bags contained a copy of the Quran, an instructional video of flying commercial airliners, and a fuel consumption calculator. Now, the FBI here in Boston is refusing to comment, but we have been unable to confirm these reports at this time. Meantime, Logan Airport is still closed to the flying public this morning, as are all airports throughout the country. When word of these crashes in New York actually arrived yesterday, the airports were immediately, and this airport particularly, immediately shut down. Several flights were still actually taxiing out on the tarmac at the time. Pilots told passengers on those planes that they had to return to the terminals. While there are many unanswered questions, one thing that Massport was able to tell us, air travel in the U.S. is about to change dramatically.
All of my friends know I'm on a flight to Los Angeles today. So everybody I know is probably wondering if I'm dead right now.
So I'm calling everybody, letting them know it's me, and you could hear crying in the background. It's terrible. I'm flabbergasted.
We want to express our deepest sympathy to the families of loved ones on the aircraft involved in these incidences.
We will be looking at things such as reducing access points to the secure side of our airfield. We will be stepping up the random ID checks that go on at U.S. airports routinely. We will be reducing, we believe, restricted areas to operational minimums.
And despite the fact that the East Coast air corridor has been shut down, for that matter, the airspace over the entire continental United States has been shut down, people have reported hearing some planes in the air. We're told that there are some grief counseling teams that have been brought in here to Logan to assist psychological and emotional counseling for families, close relatives of those who lost loved ones on those two flights out of Boston yesterday. Here today, we expect to hear more from Massport as to when this airport will open. It will not open until at least noon at the earliest. If you have a morning flight, there's really no reason to come out to Logan Airport, that's for sure. Just sit by your television or your radio and listen for further instructions. The question as to when Logan Airport will be reopened, I think, is even going to be more complicated because of what happened here yesterday, the fact that two flights came out of Logan that were involved in the crash. The crash is in New York. Speculation is that certainly Logan may be one of the last airports that will be reopened, whether it's today or sometime tomorrow. We'll be on it throughout the day. We'll have the latest from Massport here and also the investigation at Logan Airport as that intensifies. So I'm Dan Ray live out at the airport. Back to you, Scott and Kerry.
All right, Dan Ray, thank you very much. It's 5:37 now. If you had a relative on board any of those flights affected yesterday, you can call the following numbers for information. The Massport hotline is 617-568-3100. It's a 617 number, 568-3100.
Also on your screen this morning, a hotline for American Airlines. That number is 1-800-245-0999, 1-800-245-0999. And
the special number for United Airlines is 1-800-932-8555, 932-8555. That is an 800 number.
Scott, we are getting new information on the list of people on board the two planes that left here from Boston.
This is by no means a complete list, but here are some of the names as we have them right now. Ken Waldy, a Raytheon employee from Methuen, among the dead. Peter Gay, also an employee of Raytheon. He was from Andover. Richard Ross, 58 years old. He ran a consulting firm in Newton. Wellesley's Neely Casey. Mark Bavis, a BU grad from Providence, Rhode Island. He is an ice hockey scout for the Los Angeles Kings, and of course a former hockey player under Johnny Parker at BU.
And Garnet Ace Bailey, 53 years old, of Linfield, the director of pro scouting for the Los Angeles Kings hockey team. He was also a former Bruins player. David and Lynn Angel were on the plane together. He was the executive producer of the NBC TV show Frasier. The couple was returning from their home in Chatham. Daniel Lewin, 31 years old, the co-founder of Akamai Technologies in Cambridge. Brian Sweeney, 38, of Barnstable, and Jane Orth, 49, of Haverhill.
John Cahill of Wellesley was one of the victims. Tom McGinnis from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He and John Oganowski of Dracut were the co-pilot and pilot, respectively, on American Airlines Flight 11. Tara Creamer from Worcester, and Ten Hennessy of Belmont. Also, Peter and Susan Hansen and their young daughter, Christine Hansen, all from Massachusetts. Well, the pilot and co-pilot, as we mentioned, on board American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston, we're both from New England.
WBZ's Dave Robichaux has more on how their communities are coping with this tragedy.
Portsmouth, New Hampshire neighbors of Tom McGinnis, Flight 11's co-pilot, hang purple ribbons on mailboxes near the young pilot's home. Purple, they say, is a symbol of Tom's passage into another life.
They're just very religious people that read the Bible and live by what the Bible says. And I think that will help all of us in this neighborhood to get through such a horrible tragedy for our country.
At the Bethany Church in Greenland, where the McGinnis family worshipped, 800 parishioners turned out to support the co-pilot's wife, Cheryl, and his children, Tom and Jennifer.
Yeah. Cheryl McGinnis has asked us to say that Tom was a wonderful father. He was a great husband. He was a loving family man, a member of Bethany Church. He was a believer in Jesus Christ, and we know that he is with him now.
I keep looking at the cornfield behind me, hoping that my brother comes walking on out.
In Dracut, Massachusetts, the Oganowski family hangs an American flag on their front porch. 52-year-old John Oganowski was American Airlines Flight 11's pilot. He leaves his wife Margaret and 3 daughters. John's brother Jim said John flew missions over Vietnam.
There was a time where it was not cool to be in the military. John was a leader and stepped forward, joined the military in those radical hippie days where they were protesting the war.
Jim Oganowski, a full-time military man, now wants to help our government seek revenge on terrorists.
I'm in the Air National Guard, and this is quite a cowardly act, what we have seen today, attacking civilians, not military. Whatever it takes, my unit will be involved, and I would like to be the first one to step forward and be involved with that.
That report last night on just one of the victims of yesterday's plane crashes. In the box, you're looking at a live picture of New York City, which has been ground zero of this tragedy, along with the Pentagon yesterday. And, of course, the rescue efforts continue there. Thousands feared dead, but they're hopeful that some are still alive at this hour.
A full day, obviously, of frightening events there in New York City. We see what's going on there this morning. It, as you know, lasted all day long. We watched the World Trade Center towers collapse in front of our eyes early morning. By 5 o'clock at night, we were watching tower number 7 collapse as well right in front of us. And as you can see, the smoke continues. Flames even continue there this morning, as Scott mentioned, hoping that there are still survivors in the rubble as the rescue crews work through it early this morning.
Meanwhile, folks all over the country obviously affected by this. The terrorist attacks have forced many people in Boston to leave work early yesterday.
This morning, though, many people are going back to work in Boston, and WBZ's Christina Hager joins us from downtown with the very latest. Christina, good morning.
Good morning, Carrie, and you're right. It's back to work for all city and state employees today. Behind me, you see the city's tallest building, the John Hancock, which was the first to be evacuated. Workers going home early yesterday. Security guards starting on the top floor and then working their way down, asking people to leave, working their way down level by level, and then on to the surrounding buildings. By the afternoon, many of the businesses here in the Back Bay had shut down. It was like a ghost town, and now many of those workers returning to work this morning, an attempt to restore normalcy, though that may seem impossible at this point. Police were on alert in Boston's Back Bay last night after attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C. Thousands of employees had been evacuated from Boston high-rises as people worried about terrorists on American soil.
I think about the Twin Towers and them not being there anymore. It's just, I mean, I grew up in New York and I used to see them all the time, so it's just amazing they're not there anymore.
I definitely picked up the phone right away and called everybody that I could think of. Unfortunately, most of the phone lines were busy or down in New York, so it was kind of tough. 1,500 state-owned buildings were locked and staffed with extra police, and flags were at half-staff throughout the state. But no gesture could reflect the sense of hopelessness, anger, and pain people were feeling.
It does affect all of us, even if you're not in one of those areas where the catastrophe actually occurred. it's still just to be a witness to that and just to see what's going on. It's very difficult.
But my biggest concern now is to continue to protect the families in Massachusetts and to make sure that we have the right investigative resources being deployed to the assistance of the FBI so we can find the people who perpetrated this awful act of cowardice and bring them to justice.
And acting Governor Jane Swift plans to bring in stress counselors to meet with the people who work in the high-rises out here to help ease their transition back to work today. Live in the Back Bay in Boston, Christina Hager, WBZ-4 News. Back to you, Scott and Kerry.
All right, Christina, thank you very much. It's now 15 minutes before 6 o'clock. We're going to break from the news for just a moment here and get a check on our weather.
Here's Barry Burbank in the weather office with your forecast. Barry, good morning.
Good morning, Kerry, and good morning, Scott. It's a clear and it's a cool morning out there. We've got some readings down in the 40s, but in Boston we find it just under the 60-degree mark, and down in New York City it is 63 degrees and it's clear down there. So it is a peaceful day throughout New England and down through New York City today. Not much is going on. We have some readings down in the 40s in some of the lowlands, so it's a pretty chilly start to this day. Note that Hurricane Erin is still fairly close to New England, but still moving away slowly away from New England, and still creating seas of 5 to 7 feet out there. So there will be some big waves crashing on our shoreline and also some rip currents. We have the next batch of cloudiness coming through the Great Lakes. We'll see some patches of clouds coming up here for this afternoon, but that's all. Just a few around southern New England, more so across northern New England. There will be a light breeze all day, initially northwest, eventually going into the east-southeast. So along the coast, that'll cap temperatures from going any higher than the upper 60s, while inland a few miles it'll be in the middle 70s. So very nice weather coming up today. Middle 70s in the western suburbs, and the same down in New York City. Light breeze down there about 77, high tide at 7:11. Flying across the nation, we can see a tropical depression which is developing in the Gulf of Mexico, Hurricane Erin out over the Atlantic, and Tropical Storm Felix way out there, but Felix is likely to move to the north. I don't think we have to worry about that, but we'll be keeping an eye on that tropical depression which is developing in the Gulf of Mexico near Florida, causing a good deal of showers and storms down there today. We'll get our showers here tomorrow night and Friday morning, and a very cold day on Friday, only upper 50s as it tries to clear a bit in the afternoon. And then mostly sunny and a few clouds, low to mid 60s for highs on Saturday. And that's your latest forecast.
All right, Barry, thank you. It is 5:47 now. Let's head on out to the roads and see how your morning commute looks.
Good morning, Rich Kirkland.
Gary, Scott, thank you very much. Good morning. We're looking live at the Southeast Expressway. We have an accident already on the expressway just to the left of the screen, just out of the contact, right by Columbia Road near the end of the HOV lane. Word of an accident there. So that's the latest on that situation on the expressway northbound. I don't think it's as serious. When I'm thinking 15, 20 minutes, it should be cleared up, and we'll be watching the situation after the accident, seeing traffic light, as you would expect another day like this, from Columbia Road right into South Station Tunnel. Flipping to the other side of the city, inbound on Route 1. No delays out of Peabody, even out of Linfield, all the way down to downtown Boston. Some slowdowns in Charlestown. That's it. No delays at Route 1A heading past the airport. The airport is still closed, of course. Route 1A for the Sumner Tunnel looks to be all right. Downtown traffic a little bit busy. I think at the Sumner, no lane restriction yet, but a little bit busy heading into the Callahan, heading to the downtown financial district as the city starts to wake up. Traffic on Route 128 out of the North Shore, no delays. Just some slowdowns reported in Reading, Linfield, that sort of thing on the southbound side. 495 looks to be in good shape. Busy in the Andover stretch where the two interchanges, 495 and 93, come together. Had a chance to look at the Worcester situation coming out of Worcester on the Turnpike right through Framingham and Natick. Some slowdowns around Route 9. Route 9 a little bit busy at the traffic lights, but generally a light ride around the area as the city starts to wake up, the area starts to wake up to get back to business. I'm Rich Kirkland, WBZ-4 News. Back to Kerry and Scott.
All right, Rich, thank you very much. Well, I think we're all still trying to absorb the enormity of this terror this morning, the level of the devastation that hit the United States yesterday. And
WBZ's Ted Wayman takes us through a timeline with the sequence of events as they happened.
American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, took off first at 7:45 yesterday morning from Boston bound for Los Angeles. 13 minutes later, another 767, United Flight 175, also left Boston for L.A. At virtually the same moment, United Flight 93, a 757, took off from Newark, bound for San Francisco. And to the south at Washington's Dulles Airport, another 757 American Flight 77 flew off towards Los Angeles. The first time that anything was wrong was noticed by air traffic controllers who watched the jets stray from their planned routes. The This computerized radar path shows the first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, climbed out of Boston and was expected to head northwest across Massachusetts. But watch what happens. As the plane entered eastern New York, it turned sharply to the south and headed straight for Manhattan. The 767 hit the World Trade Center at 8:48 yesterday morning. And 16 minutes later, United Flight 175 delivered the second blow. The jets, fueled for cross-country flights, were filled with tens of thousands of gallons of volatile fuel. They were literally flying bombs, each with an explosive power far greater than the blast that leveled the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Based on radio communications from the planes, FAA authorities knew they were dealing with a terrorist attack and immediately moved to close New York and Washington airports. And for the first time in United States history, all flights across the country were grounded. But there were still 2 hijacked jets in the air, and one of them, American Airlines Flight 77, took aim at the Pentagon. It crashed in a fireball at 9:38. Meanwhile, the fourth plane, the flight from Newark to San Francisco, was heading west, and it traveled all the way to northeastern Ohio. The controllers monitoring radar watched as the jet did a U-turn and headed back towards the East Coast. At 10:20, 2.5 hours after the 4-pronged attack was launched, the plane crashed in a rural Pennsylvania field.
I happened to hear the plane come through. It sounded like it was running normally. When it come down over top of me, I seen it go nosedive straight into the ground down here. Everything was running fine on the plane, it sounded like.
Authorities now say 285 people, it seems, died aboard the airliners, and this morning all flights remain grounded across the United States. FAA officials say they may reopen the national airspace sometime this afternoon, but then again they may not. In any case, when the flights do resume, we're told we'll see an unprecedented level of security for U.S. aviation. But even then, it will not be an aviation system very well equipped to prevent similar suicide attacks. I'm Ted Wayman, WBZ 4 News.
So the question is, what are Americans feeling after these devastating attacks? Well, in a new CNN USA Today Gallup poll, roughly 55% believe these attacks are just the beginning of a sustained terrorist campaign against the U.S.
That is a frightening thought indeed. Almost 90% consider the attacks an act of war and say it's the most tragic event of their lifetime. And about half are very confident in President Bush's ability to handle the situation.
Now, no one has claimed responsibility for the attacks as of right now, but the main suspect, Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden is a fugitive Saudi millionaire. It is believed he's the architect of some of the worst terrorist attacks on Americans, including the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center and the bombings of 2 U.S. embassies in Africa. The FBI is offering a $5 million reward for his capture. Well, a disturbing scene in East Jerusalem this morning where Palestinians took to the streets to celebrate the attack on the U.S. You can see men, women, and children clapping and cheering. Bay State doctors, nurses, and medical technicians are on a mission of mercy to New York, as you can imagine, and more than 50 members of the UMass Disaster Medicine Assistance Team left for New York City about 1:30 this morning. They're taking medical supplies with them and will set up a field hospital in the heart of the disaster zone. Many of these volunteers have worked on other disasters, but they have never experienced anything like this.
I think we're really in unknown territory because of the magnitude of this disaster. We aren't really sure what the medical needs will be of these people. This is like a major earthquake occurring in a very populated part of our country.
The field hospital can run for 3 days at a time. A second or third team may be sent out if they are needed.
Well, this was a highly sophisticated and successful attack carried out against our country. These terrorists did prove yesterday that America can be vulnerable.
Yes, but they will also find that once again, in times of crisis, America will respond with a resolve a lot stronger. Witness this incredible scene of spontaneous patriotism on the steps of the Capitol just last night.
Hundreds of members of Congress on the steps of the Capitol last evening, and a very stirring tribute to their country and a show of solidarity in a time of crisis. That's one thing about our country, you know, when how we rally together and speak as one when in a time of crisis.
Right, and showing the president obviously support of his actions and future actions as he plans what's going to happen from here. That's obviously the question on everybody's minds. A lot of folks saying, you know, how do you attack a community abroad when an individual or a group is responsible for this? But as we just saw in the video, there are a lot of folks, if in fact, we don't know right now if it is Osama bin Laden, but a lot of folks supporting it, as we just saw, people cheering and whatnot in the streets, as we just saw. So, you know, in fact, they could be harboring this person. So it'll be interesting to see how we progress from here.
Well, this was an act of war against perhaps an unknown enemy right now, but this is a war the United States must win and will win. We're going to break from the news for just a moment and get another check on the weather with Barry.
All right, Scott, good morning to you and Carrie, and hi, everybody. On this Wednesday morning, we're looking at a clear sky across most of the region, and we find some readings which are mostly in the 40s across some of the interior sections in the lowlands to the upper 50s in Boston, lower 60s down in New York City this morning. And we're looking at some places like Nord is 43, 48 in Fitchburg. So it is a chilly morning. It's clear. The air is dry. We do still have Erin, which is out at sea, but moving very slowly towards the east, still close enough to keep producing some high swells crashing onto the New England shoreline, but that's moving away from us very gradually. We're watching a lot of cloud cover which will spin across northern New England this afternoon, and some cloudiness will start to move in here also this afternoon. A few scattered clouds at least will start to show up, but not much. So basically it's going to be a sunny day overall, and we're looking at the temperatures which will be restricted from going any higher than the upper 60s along the coast because of that wind direction which will come right in from the ocean 5 to 15 miles per hour. So the light wind will continue here and west and southwest all the way down to New York City. It'll be a sunny day in New York City, about 77 with a light breeze in from the south. And we're looking at inland temperatures from Boston in the middle 70s, a high tide at 7-11. Planning ahead, though, it looks like we're going to be having some showers come down here tomorrow afternoon, perhaps a thunder shower in a few spots. As that front comes through, we're going to actually have some showers behind the front, and we're going to have a cold north to northeast wind on Friday, and it may not even get out of the 55 to 60 range for highs on Friday. Very chilly air mass is coming up for Friday. As we fly across the nation, we do find a tropical depression forming in the Gulf of Mexico. Erin is out at sea, and then we also have a tropical storm Felix, which is also way out in here, out of the Atlantic, but that's going to move mostly towards the north and not affect us. As a result, let's go to the 4-day planner. A sunshiny day today, partly cloudy tomorrow with a few showers later in the afternoon. Some showers tomorrow night and Friday morning, and then becoming partly cloudy Friday afternoon. Breezy and cold on Friday, then sunshiny and gradually warming up on Saturday. And that is your latest forecast, Carrie and Scott.
All right, Barry, thank you. Let's go ahead and head on out to the roads and see how your morning commute looks on this Wednesday.
Rich Kirkland, good morning.
Carrie, Scott, thank you very much. Good morning. We have trouble already on the expressway. We have a crash just to the left of the screen up by Savin Hill on the expressway northbound left-hand lane, right at the end of the HOV lane near Savin Hill. Now, they need a tow truck. I don't think anybody's been hurt. You see the HOV lane traffic is open and traffic zipping up, but they'll be slowing down by Granite Avenue. I think we're about 15 minutes away from, maybe 20 minutes away from clearing that expressway accident. We'll watch that situation, of course, for you. Right after the expressway, traffic rumbles up to South Station Tunnel in pretty good shape. Then you're on the brakes again. Downtown traffic quite light. Of course, with the airport closed, there's no exiting really to speak of to the Callahan Tunnel to the right of the screen. Not a lot of traffic coming out of the Sumner Tunnel as well, so that's pretty quiet downtown. I'm Rich Kirkland, WBZ-4 News. Here's Carrie and Scott.
All right, Rich, thank you. Of course, we're going to have continuing coverage for you throughout the morning, but we're just sitting here looking, obviously, all the newspapers this morning. I'm looking at the Boston Herald, which has done a great job of capturing the story here. It says, war, U.S. vows punishment after terrorist attacks kill and injure thousands. President Bush quoted as saying the faceless coward will be punished. Also, the Boston Globe has the new day of infamy, obviously talking about the original day, Pearl Harbor. This is something that they're saying has not been seen since the days of Pearl Harbor. The one thing I heard that was interesting about that, Scott, was someone said, at least with Pearl Harbor, we knew who was attacking us. Yesterday, we didn't know.
Also an attack on a military installation.
Exactly. Today, we don't even know, still.
An attack on civilians. We're looking at a live picture of New York City. You still see the smoke rising from the rubble. and the tragedy continues to unfold. We're going to go to the early show in New York, and we will be here later in our next hour.